before the energy companies had a name on every bill, before the meter reader knocked twice a month, before central heating hissed through every wall, the British home was an engineering project, not built by architects. Built by necessity, and the woman who ran it knew every trick. 30 features. £1,000 a year. This is file number 14 of the Forgotten Britain Archive. The first thing you need to understand is that the British household of the post-war decades was not uncomfortable out of ignorance. It was managed out of expertise. Every draft, every flame, every degree of warmth was accounted for. The woman who kept the house, and in most working-class homes, it was a woman held a kind of invisible qualification that no institution ever certified and no generation ever formally inherited. When it vanished fast. If you remember a house where the parlour door stayed shut until Christmas, where the windows had a second skin of old curtain, where nothing was left on standby because nothing was ever left on at all, then you remember what we lost. Leave a note below. Every memory is part of the archive. Number 1. The draft excluder. Not the foam strip from a DIY catalogue. The original article, a rolled tube of fabric, often knitted, often shaped into a sausage dog or a coiled snake, placed along the base of the front door every single evening. In a typical semi-detached house of the 1960s, unaddressed door gaps accounted for the equivalent of leaving a 9-inch hole in the wall open to the outside air. The Draft Proofing Advisory Association, which did exist, formed in 1978. With government backing, estimated that basic draft exclusion across a terraced home could save the equivalent of £45 per year at 1975 prices, which translates to roughly £320 today. Nan made hers from an old pair of tights stuffed with newspaper. It worked. Number 2. The hot water bottle. This is the one that people remember with the most warmth, in every sense. A standard rubber bottle, filled from the kettle, placed at the foot of the bed 30 minutes before sleep. It eliminated the need to heat a bedroom at all. In a 3-bedroomed house with children, 4 hot water bottles per night used less energy than a single electric bar heater running for 1 hour. The cost of heating bedrooms electrically through the 1970s averaged out at around 12 shillings a week per room. The hot water bottle cost the heat of 1 kettle. Across a winter, the difference was substantial. The practice did not die because something better replaced it. It died because the house stopped feeling cold enough to require it. Number 3. The chimney board. When the fire was not in use, and in most homes, the sitting room fire was only lit on weekday evenings and Sunday afternoons, the chimney sat open above the grate like a tunnel directly to the North Atlantic. A chimney board, a flat panel of wood or hardboard cut to fit the fireplace opening, was pushed into place whenever the fire was cold. Its sole function was to stop the stack drawing warm air out of the room. Victorian households understood this. Post-war households understood this. By 1985, most did not. The Energy Efficiency Office published figures in 1983, suggesting that an unboarded, disused chimney could account for up to 15% of a home's total heat loss. In a mid-terrace house heated by a back boiler, that was real money disappearing straight up into the Sheffield sky. Number 4. The cold larder. Before the refrigerator became standard, which did not happen in the majority of British working-class homes until the mid-1960s, despite what the catalogue suggested, the larder was an architectural feature built into the north-facing wall of the kitchen. Stone shelves, a small vented grill, naturally cold. It kept milk fresh for 2 days, butter solid through August, cooked meat safe for 3. The energy cost was 0. The design cost was nothing. When builders stopped including larders in new housing estates from the 1970s onwards, families bought refrigerators they did not always need, running 24 hours a day, adding to a quarterly bill that was already climbing. A larder cost nothing to run for 100 years. Its replacement costs roughly £60 a year in electricity. The maths was never complicated. Number 5. The thermos flask. Not a luxury item, a piece of household infrastructure. A family in a Bradford back-to-back in 1967 might boil the kettle twice a day, once in the morning, once at tea time. The thermos kept the surplus hot for 6 hours, which meant the kettle was not boiled again for mid-morning tea, not again for an unexpected visitor, not again at 3 in the afternoon. A kettle costs approximately 2.5 pence to boil today. In 1967 terms, the equivalent wastage per unnecessary boil was more than an hour of a child's school dinner money. Multiply that across a household of 5 over a year, and the flask paid for itself within its first fortnight. But these were only the beginning, because the real savings did not come from single objects. They came from systems, and the system that saved the most money in the British home was one that most people have completely forgotten. Number 6. The copper and the washday routine. Before the automatic washing machine, which reached 50% of British households only in 1972, according to the General Household Survey of that year, Monday was washday, and washday was a managed operation. Clothes sorted into an order of cleanliness. Whites first in the hottest water. Coloureds next in the same water, now cooling. Work clothes last. Then the water, still warm, used to scrub the kitchen floor. Nothing wasted. The total hot water consumption for a full family wash, run efficiently through a single copper boiler, was less than a modern washing machine uses on a half-load synthetic cycle. The machine brought convenience. It brought it at a cost that nobody announced out loud. Number 7. The range cooker as heating unit. In homes that still had a kitchen range, and many northern homes kept them through the 1950s and into the early 1960s, even after gas was available, the range was never just for cooking. It was the kitchen's heat source, the clothes airing system, and the water heater, all drawing from a single coal or coke fire that cost 1 load a day. A Yorkist housewife in 1955 cooked the dinner, dried the children's school clothes on the rail above the range, and kept the back kitchen at a livable temperature, all from the same burning fuel that she had already paid for and carefully measured. The moment that function was split into 3 separate appliances, cooker, radiator, immersion heater, 3 separate bills appeared. Nobody rang a bell to mark the moment. Number 8. The indoor clothes horse. Not the garden line. The wooden folding rack, set before the fire or the range, doing the work of a tumble dryer at a cost of exactly nothing. By 1985, the tumble dryer had entered 42% of British homes, according to the Family Expenditure Survey of that year. Each machine used approximately 3 kilowatt-hours per cycle. At current rates, that is roughly 80 pence a load, or around £200 a year, for a family of 4 washing 3 times a week. The clothes horse cost nothing. It took longer. Time, in the post-war household, was cheaper than electricity. That equation has now reversed. But the clothes horse has not come back. Number 9. Window insulation using secondary glazing, the improvised kind. Not the sealed double glazing units installed from the 1980s onwards. The earlier version, which involved pinning heavy-gauge polythene sheeting to the inner window frame with drawing pins and a warm iron to shrink it taut. Available in hardware shops from the mid-1960s for a few shillings a roll. Effective at reducing window heat loss by up to 40%, according to the Building Research Establishment's own figures from 1974. An entire house could be done in a weekend for less than £2. In 2025 values, the equivalent saving on a heating bill would run to £150 per winter. It looked like a practical job. It was a practical job. It disappeared the moment double glazing became a symbol of having moved up. Number 10. The pressure cooker. A cast aluminium pan, sealed, building internal steam pressure to cook at temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius. A joint of beef that would take 2.5 hours in the oven took 45 minutes in the pressure cooker, on a single gas ring, at roughly 1/4 of the energy cost. By 1960, there were an estimated 3 million pressure cookers in use in Britain, according to the Aluminium Development Association. They were passed down. They were repaired. They were considered a serious piece of kitchen equipment, not a gadget. By 1990, they had largely left the kitchen, replaced by convenience food, microwaves, and the idea that cooking from raw materials was somehow inefficient. The irony is that the pressure cooker was the most efficient cooking tool ever brought into a domestic. If you remember one of these in your mam's kitchen, the hiss of the weight, the smell of the steam, you know exactly what we mean. And you probably know that the meals that came out of it were better than anything that came out of a foil tray. Number 11. The airing cupboard as drying system. Positioned around the hot water cylinder in most post-war houses, The airing cupboard ran warm all day from the residual heat of the tank. Damp towels went in on Monday. Dry, warm towels came out on Tuesday. Sheets, school uniforms, the good tablecloth, all dried and aired without a single additional penny spent. The heat that was warming the water was simultaneously doing a second job. The cylinder had to be hot regardless. The airing was free. In households that replaced the hot water cylinder with a combi boiler, which stores no water and therefore generates no ambient warmth, the airing cupboard became a storage cupboard. Cold, useless for its original purpose. The tumble dryer arrived to fill the gap it left. Number 12. Loft insulation, the original kind, laid by hand. Before cavity wall specialists and government schemes, families insulated their own lofts. Loose mineral wool, available in rolls from builders' merchants throughout the 1970s, at around 50 pence a roll. The recommended depth was 4 inches in 1971. It took a Saturday morning. The Department of Energy's own estimates from 1,976 placed the annual saving in a detached house at between £40 and £60, a meaningful figure when average weekly male earnings were £33. The families that did it themselves, on a weekend, without a grant, without a contractor, saved money for decades on a single afternoon's work. Number 13. The milk delivery system as micro-refrigeration. The daily pint on the doorstep, delivered at 5 in the morning, kept in a cool porch or shaded step, was never left to sit long enough to spoil. Families bought what they would use that day. The modern habit of buying 4 pints at once and storing them, 2 of which will be poured down the sink by the end of the week, would have struck a 1,965 housewife as straightforwardly wasteful. The milkman's round was not nostalgia. It was a supply chain calibrated to a household that did not overspend, did not overbuy, and did not refrigerate what it had not yet earned the need to keep. Number 14. The earth closet and composting in homes that kept them. In rural areas and some older urban terraces well into the 1950s, kitchen waste went to a compost heap or a pig keeper on the street rather than a dustbin. In a Lincolnshire village in 1952, a household of 4 might produce 1 small paper bag of genuine rubbish per week. Everything else, vegetable peelings, ash, paper, bread scraps, had a destination that was not landfill. The saving was not in energy. It was in the cost of food never wasted, of soil continually improved for a kitchen garden that fed the family through summer and into autumn. The supply loop was closed. Nothing in it had a price attached. Number 15. The internal shutters and secondary curtains. Windows in Victorian and Edwardian terraces, the housing stock that most working-class families were still occupying in 1960, often came with wooden internal shutters folded into the wall. Most families did not know they were there. In homes where they were used, closed at dusk, they reduced window heat loss almost as effectively as double glazing. Where shutters had gone, a second curtain, a heavy one, floor length, backed with blackout lining, did comparable work. The BBC ran a feature on the practice in 1974, the winter after the 3-day week, when energy had suddenly become a subject of national emergency. For 3 months, the whole country remembered what its grandparents had always known. Then the crisis passed, and the curtains came back as decoration. Number 16. The ceramic hot water tank jacket. The cylinder jacket. A quilted, fitted sleeve for the hot water tank, available from hardware stores from the late 1960s. The Department of Energy estimated in 1978 that an unlagged hot water cylinder lost heat, equivalent to boiling the same water twice daily. A jacket costing 30 shillings at 1,970 prices paid back its cost within 6 weeks, and continued saving money for 20 years. By 1977, local councils were distributing them free in some boroughs. In 1990, a survey by the Energy Saving Trust found that 30% of British homes still had an unlagged cylinder. 30%. A 30-year-old solution, widely available, often free, ignored in 3 homes in 10. Number 17. The bread bin and pantry bread management. Before sliced, wrapped bread came to dominate from the mid-1960s. Bread was bought in larger, unsliced loaves, kept in a ceramic bread crock, and managed so that nothing went mouldy. The end of the loaf, the heel, was never thrown away. It became bread pudding, or fried bread, or toast. A Sheffield miner's wife in 1949 would have regarded throwing bread in the bin as a moral failure, not merely a waste of money. The saving was not dramatic per loaf. Across a year, assuming one large loaf per family per day at post-war prices, the difference between a household that wasted bread and one that did not was equivalent to several weeks of coal money. You did not waste coal. You did not waste bread. Number 18. The fire management system, banking and damping. A coal fire was not simply lit and left to burn. It was managed through the day, banked at night by heaping ash over the remaining coals to suppress combustion and retain heat until morning, when it could be raked back to life without relighting. Damped during the day when the house was empty by closing the flue damper. A family in a Coventry terrace in 1958 that banked their fire correctly used approximately 1.5 hundredweight of coal per week in winter. A family that simply let it burn used 3. The difference at 1,958 prices of around 2 shillings and 6pence per hundredweight was 5 shillings a week, or £13 a year. At today's equivalent, that is over £300. Saved by knowing which way to move a piece of iron. Number 19. The reuse of cooking water. Potato water kept for thinning gravy. Vegetable stock retained for soup. Pasta water used to rinse the colander, then the pot. None of these practices saved money on the water itself. Maine's water was too cheap to measure in those terms. What they saved was the energy cost of heating fresh water, the food cost of ingredients that went into the stock, and the time cost of making gravy from a packet. More than that, they represented a fundamental understanding of cooking as a closed system, not a linear process where inputs went in one end and waste came out the other. Number 20. The box oven and residual heat cooking. A method documented across Lancashire, Yorkshire, and the Midlands from the late Victorian period through to the 1950s. After the morning baking was done and the range cooling, a box oven, a wooden or tin-lined chest, sometimes padded with old blankets, was used to finish slow cooking, using the food's own retained heat. A casserole brought to full boil on the fire for 15 minutes, then sealed into the box, would be ready and cooked through by evening. No additional fuel. The science was simple. A well-insulated container loses only 2 to 3 degrees of heat per hour. The technique was known. It required discipline and a little physics. When the range went, the method went with it. Nobody taught it to the generation that followed. If any of this sounds like the kind of thing your granddad mentioned once and nobody wrote down, you are understanding exactly why this archive exists. Number 21. The condensation management routine. Before UPVC windows sealed houses against natural ventilation, condensation was managed deliberately. Opening bedroom windows for 20 minutes every morning, regardless of season. Wiping sills with a dry cloth. Not drying clothes inside without ventilation. These practices prevented the damp that, left untreated, would eventually damage walls, rot window frames, and require remedial work, costing many times more than the drafts they were nominally letting in. The perfectly sealed modern home, unable to breathe, produces chronic condensation problems that Britain's housing stock did not face at anything like the same scale before 1990. The solution was built into the old habit of the morning window. The habit cost nothing. Its loss costs thousands. Number 22. Soda crystals and vinegar as the cleaning system. Before the branded cleaning product had colonized the British kitchen, a process that accelerated sharply through the 1960s and 1970s. As television advertising reached its full power, the standard cleaning kit was soda crystals for the sink and drain, vinegar for the windows and surfaces, and carbolic soap for the floor. A week's supply of all three cost a few pence. A modern equivalent cleaning kit, buying branded versions of the same functions, cost several pounds. Across a year, a household that returned to the pre-brand cleaning method could save £80 to £100 at current prices. The products were not inferior. They were, in most cases, chemically equivalent or more effective. What they lacked was packaging. Number 23. The cellar and its role in food preservation. In older Victorian terraces, a housing type that still housed the majority of northern working-class families through the 1950s. The cellar maintained a natural temperature of 8 to 12 degrees Celsius, year-round, regardless of season. Vegetables, root crops, preserved jars, and cured meats were stored there without refrigeration. A Nottingham family in 1955, with a functional cellar, spent less on preserving food in a week than a family without one spent running a refrigerator in a day. When these properties were renovated or demolished and replaced with post-war housing without cellars, a natural food preservation system with no operating cost was removed and replaced with an electrical one that would run for the next 50 years. Number 24. The paraffin heater for targeted warmth. Not an ideal fuel. Not a healthy one when used poorly, but in a house with no central heating, where the sitting room fire was enough to keep one room warm and the rest of the house was cold, a small paraffin heater moved from room to room as needed, used for an hour, while a child did homework or an elderly parent sat, reading, was cheaper than heating a whole unused room from a gas fire. The paraffin heater was targeted heat. You brought the warmth to where the person was. You did not heat the ceiling of an empty room. The logic was basic. By the late 1990s, it had become entirely unfamiliar. Number 25. The chest freezer and bulk buying discipline. When the chest freezer arrived in British working-class households in the mid-1970s, earlier for some, later for many, it was used properly. Whole pigs from the butcher, halved, trays of sausages, bread bought in quantity when it was fresh. The freezer was not a place where things went to be forgotten. It was managed like a ledger. A Wolverhampton family interviewed by Which? Magazine in 1977 reported saving £40 a year, roughly £320, today, through bulk purchase of meat alone. The chest freezer rewarded discipline. Used without it, it rewarded nothing. It simply made a larger space in which to forget food. Number 26. The newspaper as insulation. Under the lino, between the floorboard and the covering, newspapers were laid as a draft barrier and insulating layer in homes throughout the country until fitted carpets became standard in the 1960s. Under wallpaper, a layer of newspaper pasted first was common practice in the north of England, through the 1940s and into the 1950s. The Illustrated London News, the Daily Mirror, the Yorkshire Post. All of them pulled double duty as building material when the house demanded it. This was not poverty's improvisation. It was physics correctly applied with available material. Number 27. The neighbour economy. Not a feature of the house itself. A feature of the street. The sharing of a full load of washing between two families using one copper. The borrowing of a neighbour's oven for the Sunday joint when your own range was failing. Collective bulk orders from the coal merchant, splitting a ton between 3 households at the same rate as the full load. The street as a unit of economic management. This is documented across working-class areas in Sheffield, Liverpool, Birmingham, and Glasgow, through oral history projects from the 1980s and 1990s. It was not charity, it was calculation. It saved money because it was designed to save money. It ended when the street stopped knowing itself. Number 28. The cold bedroom as standard. In the British home before central heating, which did not reach 50% of properties until 1970, according to the General Household Survey, the bedroom was not heated. It was not expected to be. The bedroom was for sleeping, and sleeping was done under blankets. A minimum of 3 wool blankets per bed was standard. Often more. The practice of sleeping in a cold room, rather than heating it, is now understood by sleep scientists to produce better quality sleep than sleeping in a warm one. The correlation between rising central heating use, rising bedroom temperatures, and declining reported sleep quality across the British population between 1975 and 2005 has been noted in sleep medicine literature. The cold bedroom was not a hardship, it was physiology, correctly applied, without knowing the theory. Number 29. Repair as a default. The decision tree that governed the working-class household before the 1980s did not begin with replace. It began with repair. A broken sole on a child's shoe went to the cobbler on the cobbler, High Street. A fraying jumper went back on the needles. A cracked tile was replaced individually, not as part of a full bathroom refit. The cobbler on a Sheffield side street in 1963 charged 2 shillings for a full sole replacement. The school shoes lasted another 18 months. The alternative buying new cost 14 shillings. Over the course of a child's school career, the difference between a household that repaired and one that replaced was, in modern values, the equivalent of a month's rent, every time, for every object, multiplied across a household of 4 or 5. This was not frugality as philosophy. It was frugality as arithmetic. Number 30. Knowing when to stop. The final skill. The hardest one. The ability to identify the point at which something, a fire, an oven, a wash, a light, had done its work and could be stopped. The British housewife of the post-war decades operated not by instinct, but by calculation made so habitual that it looked like instinct. She knew the exact moment the oven could be turned off, and the residual heat would finish the job. She knew how long the last of the coal would hold. She knew when the copper had done enough, and the water could be let cool. This was not a skill written in any book. It was transmitted in kitchens, in washhouses, in the back rooms of terraced houses in 1,000 towns across these islands. It died not because anyone decided to kill it. It died because the houses changed, and the bills arrived, and nobody looked up to ask why the numbers had grown so large. This was file number 14 of the Forgotten Britain archive. If any of this lived in your nan's house, your mam's kitchen, your street, leave it below. That memory belongs in the archive, not in the silence. There are 99 more files. Subscribe and turn the page with us.